come from Maine to share with you a little bit about what's happening in the development of seaweed aquaculture in the Northeast in the US and how this exciting new industry has the potential to change our relationship to the ocean. So I come from Maine. I grew up in a small town, and when I was in high school, I realized three things. I loved plants, I loved growing plants, and I loved the ocean. So naturally, being a creative person, I put all these things together and decided that I wanted to be a seaweed farmer when I grew up. Undeterred by the fact that this wasn't actually a career choice that existed at the time, I still went off to college for aquaculture. Now, what is aquaculture? Basically, it's just farming in the water. And so when you consider that this earth is mostly water, it seems quite reasonable that we should learn how to cultivate our food and resources in the water. However, the idea of aquaculture in the US was really short-circuited by the development of intensive fish farming at the time. Concerns about production, pollution, diseases, and escapes really affected the way that people thought about aquaculture. And all I learned about in school was mostly animal aquaculture. So of course, being a plant person, when I got out of college, I just sort of thought, well, that was foolish. Now what do I do? So my first job after going to school was in the fisheries. I worked as a NOAA fishery observer. This put me on almost every kind of fishing vessel in the Northeast. And so I saw firsthand this complex, dangerous, and changing nature of our fisheries. So what are fisheries? Really, they represent our relationship with the ocean. They provide our seafood. They support our working waterfronts, our coastal communities. They're our livelihoods and a way of life for many people, our marine heritage. So a lot relies on our fisheries. And the problem is that our oceans are changing rapidly, and our industries are under a great deal of stress and uncertainty. Eventually, though, I did get to grow some seaweeds. I ended up in graduate school in Connecticut and working as part of a collaborative project, developed the first kelp nursery system to produce native kelp seed. And this created a whole new potential industry. From there, I went back to Maine. I worked as a sea grant extension agent and continued working on cultivation techniques and sharing my love and enthusiasm in the wonderful world of seaweeds with others. And I think that the timing was right because the idea really started to catch on. Well, in just a short few years, we were seeing a proliferation of seaweed-related projects in science and research and development, in new farms, in new nurseries, in creation of educational programs based on seaweed and seaweed aquaculture. We're seeing new companies and new products and new ideas all around seaweed and this idea that we can start to cultivate our native species. This is happening not only in the Northeast, but also all around the United States. So what is seaweed aquaculture and why is it so appealing? Well, I thought the best way to show you would be to just take you and show you. So I'm going to go through the process here. So you start with local native plants. You go out and you look for plants that have favorable characteristics that you would want to farm. You collect the reproductive source tissue from these plants, bring them back to the lab, clean them off, dry them very gently, and then when you resubmerge them in seawater, you'll get this huge release of these little zooming, swimming microspores. Now, these will quickly settle and lose their flagella and attach to a substrate and create the first cell of the gametophyte stage. Now, the gametophyte stage is the alternate stage, reproductive stage of the kelps, and they are separate male and female gametophytes, and when these mature, they'll release their eggs and spermatozoids and reproduce and create the adorable little baby kelp plants. Now, this all takes place in the seaweed nursery on seed string that's wrapped around PVC pipes in a tank. It takes about a month in controlled environmental conditions, and when you can just start to see the plants on the string, you can take these spools out to the farm for planting. This is actually a really easy process. You put the rope through the spool, you tie off the string, and then it just spirals off around your rope. Now, the system is a very simple horizontal longline system. The rope is attached at either end with moorings and held in place by buoys, and it's submerged about 6 feet. So you plant your farm in the fall and you tend it carefully through the winter. And the plants will grow kind of slowly at first, but then really start to pick up with the return of the light. By the end of the season, which is in the spring, you can get plants that are 10 to 20 feet or more with really high yields. And you harvest your farm, you clear off the farm for the summer months, and you get ready for the next season. Now this is sugar kelp. This is the first crop that we started with. It's a really delicious, versatile kelp, but we've also been working on other species, including the wing kelp, which is a highly desirable sea vegetable with a midrib. It's similar to the Pacific wakame, some of you might be familiar with. Also been developing a new crop we were calling skinny kelp, and this is a kelp that with a really unique, very long, skinny morphology, and it occurs only on certain ledges in the wild, but when you farm it, you get this really interesting plant. This is a horsetail kelp. It's a hardy kelp with a split blade. It produces a large amount of alginates, which are excellent in cooking and for skin care. And then some of the red seaweeds we've been working on are the most popular dulse, and also the purple laver, which is our own native species of porphyra, highly nutritious sea vegetable, very high in protein. And we've been developing organic certification for our nursery and our farm. We were able to get certified through MAFCA in Maine last year, and this ensures healthy and sustainable production of this new crop. So why are people really getting into seaweeds? Well, they're simple, but they're complex and very profound in how they operate in the environment. They are ancient and diverse marine macroalgae. They contribute to high amounts of primary productivity through photosynthesis in the ocean. They contribute to energy and nutrient cycling. They can take up nitrogen, phosphorus, and carbon and then release oxygen. They can also pick up dissolved valuable trace elements and build them into their tissues, and they create three-dimensional structure for habitat that support high amounts of biodiversity. Now, seaweed farming is especially exciting when you think that you can create high amounts of biomass using no fresh water, no fertilizers, no chemicals, and no arable land. This is extremely profound when you think about natural resource use of terrestrial farming. When you harvest the seaweeds, you're actually pulling out nutrients from the water. This can be a useful tool when you're dealing with problems of eutrophication or acidification, and so you can locally improve your water quality. You can integrate seaweeds with your animal, your fish and shellfish aquaculture for a more balanced approach to aquaculture. And you can use the techniques of seaweed aquaculture to replant and restore wild beds and habitats. For people, seaweed is a highly nutritious food that we should all be eating every day, but also is an extremely versatile biomass that can be used to feed our soils, our plants, and our animals. It has the potential to start building bridges between our wild harvest fisheries and our aquaculture development, bring them together and integrate them. And seaweed is beautiful, it's valuable, it's inspiring, and it acts as a doorway and a connector for a lot of different people. And to me, that's the most important part, is to be able to see people reconnect with the natural world through seaweed. As I said, seaweeds are some of the most nutrient-dense vegetables on the planet. They're extremely mineral-rich. Many of us in the world are mineral deficient. They contain a wide array of vitamins and healthy carbohydrates, proteins, ocean-based fats. They, in the dried form, have a salty taste. They have an optimum sodium to potassium ratio. They're naturally one of the best sources of iodine on the planet. So if you think we could replace our troublesome table salt with this living, healthy salt, it could really do amazing wonders overall in our health intake. Now, the potential to integrate aquaculture and our wild fisheries is immense, but we really need to be working with the fishermen and the industries that already exist In Maine in particular, our biggest industry is the lobster industry, and that it has more of a summer season. And seaweed farming takes place in the winter. And so there's this idea that we could utilize the existing fishing infrastructure and have all these people that already have boats and working waterfront resources to be able to cultivate this new crop in a really big way and diversify into aquaculture, so that we're growing on every side and looking at the potential for the oceans to be this source of like abundant life and resources instead of just this sort of dismal, emptying place. Seaweeds have this great ability to connect people and ideas and systems, and I've had the great privilege to see all of these different groups work together, and it's going to be important for all these different groups to work together to build a new industry, because we want to do it the right way. We don't want to make a lot of the same mistakes that we've made in other industries. And so really sort of thinking about all the different aspects of how to develop this new industry in the United States and just do it in a sustainable, healthy way is going to be really important to build that new system. I am going to go back to Maine after this event and start my harvest season. I recently left my work at Sea Grant to become a full-time seaweed farmer, which is what I wanted to do in the first place. And I have a 20-acre farm. I have maybe 30,000 pounds of seaweed in the water, and there's just a lot of work to do to figure out how to get it from the farm to you. So my vision is to see seaweed on every table in America, because I really do think it can contribute to our health and wellness and connect us again to our oceans. And that's my plan. And I just started this company, and I hope that we'll do great things in the future. Thank you.